did some shopping, bought a couple of secondhand records, which was nice.
Nice.
And then we've come back up here.
Well, we're in the right place, right? Here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Bod and I know each other from working together at the Royal College of Physicians. So Bod was president when I started as chair of ethics. And that's kind of how we know each other. And then we worked together during the pandemic. A joyful time for everyone. And here we are on the other side of it now.
Are we going to, is there going to be like a start and go, or how are we going to approach this?
So normally we do things a bit backwards. We just start talking.
Oh, okay.
And see where we get.
Have things begun? I apologize.
Well, no.
You can re-ask.
I hit record because I have a bad habit of forgetting to hit record. So I always hit record. Set of things you want to watch on Netflix, and I feel like that feeds into it as well. It's like you should be able to make the perfect choice for your kid. You should, be able to craft the right set of vaccines that you want. And then when there's any kind of uncertainty, we struggle with how we deal with that.
I think you're 100% correct about that. I wrote a piece a while back called the uncertainty dance, right? Science and the uncertainty dance, because your audience knows this so well. Science is hard. It's uncertain. It moves forward iteratively. We're always arguing, right?
Yes.
It's and it's hard to communicate that, and at the same time saying, given the evidence that we have right now, this is the best choice. That doesn't sound like a really sexy science communication strategy, versus the doubt mongers, the misinformation mongers who say this is causing turbo cancer, this is going to kill you. Like, we had these definitive, scary statements that play to our negativity bias. So you're right, and I also think the point you make about pop culture wanting us to always optimize everything, right? You have to optimize everything. And there's almost a moralistic aspect to this. If you're not doing that as a parent, as an individual, somehow you're failing, right? So I think that makes it more difficult to provide people with science communication strategies that are going to be persuasive.
I saw this a lot when I was looking at, I did a little study a while back looking at reproductive apps that people use. And it was really interesting to see that, first of all, like most wellness apps, reproductive apps are completely unregulated in most countries. So you can just create an app about fertility or a pregnancy and put it out there, and you can put whatever you want on it, and someone can use it if they want to. And one of the apps that was out there claimed to have ways to reverse Down syndrome that was identified in the womb. And you can see how dangerous these types of things are when you consider a situation like that, right? So Down syndrome is completely irreversible. That is not a situation that you can change with diet or exercise or medicine. That is a fundamental issue that's happened with the genetics, and there's no going back from that. But there's also this huge drive in parenting and being the best mom and the best pregnant woman you can be, that hundreds of people are using this app because they want to be able to provide the best situation they can for their child. They want to be the very best mom, but it's an impossible task because what's being promised is it's not even snake oil. It's like unicorn blood. It's so far out there that it's impossible.
And think about the Tylenol comment that, the debacle,
oh my God.
the Tylenol debacle that we saw from the United States. And it plays to exactly what you're saying, parental guilt, the idea that you have to be the perfect parents. You have to feed your kids in the most perfect, pure, clean way. And if you don't do those things, you're kind of failing, right? You're kind of failing. And it is fascinating how misinformation mongers, I know that's I sound like a conspiracy theorist myself, but just for brevity's sake, those who are pushing misinformation,
it's fine.
Really
this morning
play on
we
that.
use the word goopification.
The goop, they really play on that, right? They lean into it. One of my and they're so conceptually, they again, it sounds like a conspiracy theorist, but for the spirit of our conversation, they're so conceptually inconsistent too, right? Those who are pushing misinformation, somehow vaccines or these other kind of biomedical interventions are evil and haven't been tested and are doing harm. Meantime, they're selling supplements that are, completely unproven, have potential harm, aren't surveilled, massive conflicts of interest associated with the entire marketing of supplements, on and on and on. All that is okay. That's okay. But somehow the vaccines or other biomedical interventions are evil, right? And in fact, I think it's gotten so bad with supplements that if a healthcare provider is marketing supplements, it's a major red flag for bunk. Look, it's a red flag. There may be some out there that aren't pushing bunk, but it's a major red flag for bunk. And I think that also highlights this conceptual inconsistency that we see throughout this space.
One of the things I found really interesting is, so I'm 40, and all of my social media knows I'm 40, because you got to put your date of birth in when you sign up for these things. And when I hit
you don't
40,
look at Alexis.
why, thank you. I know I've got just this beautiful baby face. And so yeah, when I turned 40, I noticed that I started to get perimenopause and menopause supplement adverts. And the way that these are advertised to you is that, and rightly so, sort of saying, perimenopause and menopause is not your fault. It is a really awful thing to go through and can be really difficult for women. But then they have this little twist, which is like, we've got these perfect supplements, which, by the way, cost about £50 for a bottle. And if you really care about yourself, you'll take them. And it's that little tweak at the end. It's like, well, if you really cared about yourself. And so it's like this guilt aspect as well. It's not even the doubt mongering. It's like the guilt mongering as well.
For sure. And there was an interesting study in one of the books I wrote a while back that talked about how that guilt even plays into the anti-aging, cosmetic, beauty aspect of the story, especially for women, but increasingly for men, where I believe it was a Canadian study. It was a qualitative study, so you got to be careful not to overinterpret, but they ask women, do you know this stuff doesn't work? And they kind of know it doesn't work, but they feel so much pressure and so guilty if they don't use this stuff, right? They're doing something, they're failing at some fundamental level, that they buy it. They buy it anyway. And the other really important point that you raise in the current information ecosystem, you get pulled into these echo chambers. Like, so maybe you have kind of a very innocent reason for looking up, a particular supplement, or you have a particular health concern, or maybe you want to know about trad wives or the manosphere. Once you enter that echo chamber, you're pulled in, right? And then you get shown all the other kinds of conspiracy theories that are associated with that general kind of echo chamber belief system. So, you're interested, you're trad wife curious, and next thing you know, you're getting anti-vax posts, right? And I think that that's a big part of this story too. You're invited into this community. You feel like you're part of this community, and all of a sudden you're getting all the noise and conspiracy theories associated with this community.
So I'm interested in, how we as society, but specifically within health, can sort of fight back a bit. So you go back to the Tylenol, so paracetamol being identified as a potential problem during pregnancy. Now, when that came out, I know that obstetricians across the world were shocked and knew this was going to be a real problem, because paracetamol is one of the 3 medicines in the UK which is licensed for use in pregnancy, and we know is utterly safe. So to have that rug pulled out from underneath it was a really big deal. But we have to hold our hands up and say, well, hang on, how do we not know that all the other drugs that we use in everybody else aren't safe in pregnancy? And the reason we don't is because when it comes to trials, we exclude pregnant women. And we've got lots of ways we could monitor the safety of commonly used medicines in pregnancy, but we haven't invested in that as a scientific and as a health community, which is we've shot ourselves in the foot, because that then allows misinformation to take the upper hand. And I think we have to take the gloves off, stop being nice about it, and start playing hardball, because if we don't, they'll take the floor.
Yeah, I think this is a really good point, and we touched on the tension around science communication a little bit earlier about how those who are pushing misinformation are loud, they're fearless, they're definitive, and often, not always, but often those pushing science-informed facts are more careful in their wording. That uncertainty is kind of peppered throughout, and that's the cliche, a knife to a gunfight, right? So I agree with you. I think that we need to, just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. I think we need to be creative in how we communicate about science in a way that cuts through the noise, but it's still accurate. And there are great science communicators out there doing that. I wouldn't put myself in that Venn diagram, but I try to do that, leverage pop culture and things like that. And there is a body of evidence that tells us those efforts make a difference. You want to pre-bunk, you want to tell people what kind of noise is coming, what kind of misinformation is coming. You want to debunk, correct the information. You want to try to use nudges to get people to do the right thing. And yes, there's going to be situations where you're going to want to use regulation. And of course, teaching critical thinking and media literacy, it really does make a difference. So all of those things matter. One of the things I am really passionate about now is this idea of scientific consensus, talking about the nature of scientific consensus, the breadth of it, because that pushes against the false balance and middle ground fallacy that pervades our information environment right now, right? There was a really interesting study that was done in the Czech Republic where they asked the public, what do you think the experts think about the COVID vaccine? The PhDs, the public health experts, what the clinicians, what do you think they think? And 4 out of 5 people, you guys, 4 out of 5 people said, I think the experts are split. 50% think it's a good idea. 50% think it's a bad idea, which is, complete inaccurate representation of the scientific consensus, where there's almost uniform, right, agreement that it's safe and effective. But that highlights the power of false balance. And if I could come back to the good news in that study, by the way, is they did find if they explain the scientific consensus, you did change.
This has been a Haunted Mouse production. Cut that out.